Wonderful to be here, and go Bears! Go Bears! Yep, I hear the Callums out there. That's always a great thing to rely on. I really love being here because for once in my life I was able to hop on BART, and instead of going to SFO and then taking a series of planes crisscrossing the nation, I could just, stop off in Montgomery, and that felt really awesome. And I'm a freshman at Berkeley studying poli-sci. And as a university student whose public speaking career has, since the age of around 7 or 8, taken me to countless places around the world, I've had the opportunity to speak to lots of people similar to yourselves at education conferences, at corporate events, at nonprofits, who are at the top of their respective fields. And at the same time, I've had this very interesting kind of contrasting experience where I'm in this sea of university students and we're all kind of feeling really lost and asking who are we and what are we doing and will we figure this out by the time we have to declare our major and all those kinds of questions. And if you've watched any movies about the college experience, or if you yourselves were sober enough to remember those days, you'll remember that it's this very sometimes raucous experience punctuated with the kinds of life choices that send you cartwheeling through the streets at 3 a.m. in the morning and crying to roommates at 3 in the afternoon. Maybe. But why am I telling you this? Well, moments like those and 1,000 others that happen over the course of lifetimes are just a part of coming of age. Coming of age. Coming of age. It's such a big phrase. It's rife with so many connotations, all kinds of expectations, and my hope going into this speech is that we never really stop doing it. I was visiting my 20-something-year-old cousin in San Francisco around New Year's, and I apologize, I'm going to preface this with, when I talk with my cousin, I'm very colloquial to the extent that, one would expect between cousins, and I said, as a freshman, we kind of expect by the time that you're a senior in college that you're like this grown-up and you have your shit figured out. But all the seniors I've talked to have no idea what they're doing. They've studied something for 4 years and they still don't know where they're really going or what they're passionate about. And that's really scary to me. So my question to my cousin, as I looked up at her with these beseeching big puppy eyes and the power which I had perfected, okay, maybe not. She still doesn't give me that great Christmas presents. But the question that I asked her was, do you have your shit figured out? She looked at me like I was crazy and shook her head and then said these words, which for some reason I've carried with me as strangely inspirational, which for Adora, no one ever has it all figured out. By the time they do, they learn to say that they haven't. Because if you're that person who says, I know it all, I have it figured out, then you're kind of stuck up, and nobody wants to have it figured all out when nobody else does. That perspective has enabled me to ask a lot of people about their experiences, whether in their professional lives or their private lives, and it's made me realize that regardless of how old we are, it's rare to find somebody who knows exactly what they're doing, exactly where they're going, 100% of the time. And that's why I think that humility is the central theme of this talk, and a theme that I hope to make central to my life and everything I do, regardless of how old I am. Humility in everything we do and everything we say, so that no matter our position, whether we're the new kid on the block still learning the ropes or the senior employee who's been working for years and years, we continue to learn. We are never really quite done with coming of age, because the moment we are, we're done. We're done changing, we're done improving, we're done learning. We've become outdated and obsolete. And particularly in this place, in the Bay Area, I think that that's one word that nobody wants to use to describe themselves or their company. And particularly here in the Bay Area, with the influx of young people coming into the workplace, there are both challenges and opportunities for established companies. Huge congratulations on your 20th year anniversary, by the way. That's incredible. Y'all are older than I am. I think that's something to be immensely proud of. And I was thinking about this, what it means to be established, what it means to have reached this level of experience and expertise. And it made me realize that I think the big challenge isn't one that comes from outside your company walls, that comes from competitors, or that comes from clients, whatever else. It's the one that happens inside all of us, whether we're freshmen in college or senior engineers. The big challenge is that it's easy, way too easy, especially when you're amazing at what you do, to behave and to pretend to think like you're all grown up. And you might be looking at me like, but we are all grown up. But here's the thing. After my first semester was done and dusted, and I was like, okay, finals are over, I'm gonna go back and visit my high school. I went there and I walked these halls and I saw tiny 10th graders walking where I had once been a tiny 10th grader, and I felt like a visitor to this foreign land with some ancient history and called my home. I wondered if this would happen years from now, if I would go back to Berkeley and think of the tiny freshmen with the same sense of distance between my past and present selves. But I have learned so much. In fact, I've probably learned the most in my life through building bridges between my past and present selves. I learned when I talked to younger friends or even my cousins who were born on this side of the millennium. So I urge you all to never feel too grown up. It's easy when companies like yours have so many years as amazing, respected providers of your services, being incredible at what you do, with senior engineers and consultants who are confident and comfortable in their roles. But I think that's why it can be so valuable to have younger members of the workforce entering with technological intuitiveness and fresh approaches. I want us to be thinking about a few central questions today. How does your company embrace young people in the workforce? How can companies' policy changes and new attitudes predict the long-term success of the company? And I also wanted to kind of gauge where you all are at age-wise. I know that that's sort of a sensitive question. My apologies in advance. What happens in this room stays in this room. I won't go out and talk about it.
21.
So why don't you stand up if you're in your 20s? Okay, all right, congratulations. Stand up if you're in your 30s. Or otherwise signify. Cool. Stand up if you are in your 40s. Or
it takes a little extra time.
The pain.
Take your time. Take your time.
Oh God. Stand up if you're in your 50s. All right.
Is that because we can stand up?
That deserves another congratulations.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you're in your 60s. But in all honesty, wow, this is incredible. I think this is one of the most genuinely diverse groups of people that I've seen in a long time, because I go to many education conferences, and what I usually see is there's this very wide divide. You have some new teachers who are maybe in their 20s, and then you have the principals and superintendents who are in their 50s and 60s, and some even like older end of that. And so there's, you know, kind of this giant wasteland in between, and I think that you as a company have done something really wonderful here to bring people of all ages together. Harnessing and welcoming the opportunities the younger workforce can bring, or that a younger generation can bring, is key to the sustainability of any company. And I really like the metaphor of a forest that needs both new growth and old growth. Healthy companies are populated by members of diverse ages and backgrounds, exactly like what you have here. But I've also, from reading countless articles, talking to people, looking at studies, I've seen that there's some amount of discontent sometimes when young people are entering the workforce. Complaints might include, oh, they don't dress as well, or they behave really, they're kind of lazy, or they don't work the hours we want them to, and many other things of that nature. I think that young people have a tremendous amount to contribute, and making the time commitment necessary to train us is completely worth it, not only for your personal aspirations, but also for the future of your work as a whole. Changing demographics within workplaces aren't just happening here, they're happening across the world. When we look at the world and how much it is made up of young people, one figure that I saw a couple years ago is 18%, I think under 35 or something like that. In some countries, it's even, like there are much, much higher numbers of young people. That when we look at how companies' demographics are changing, we're just seeing this incredible move younger and younger. So here, so close to Silicon Valley, there are a number of companies with people in their 20s or 30s in decision-making roles. So I think any of you who watched The Social Network or paid attention to the history of Facebook know that Mark Zuckerberg was, you know, in Harvard when he was starting to think about all these ideas. If you look at Snapchat, Evan Spiegel dropped out of Stanford. There are countless other examples of people who were just still in their college dorm rooms or in a parent's garage when they came up with their ideas that have now become multi-billion-dollar companies. So your younger coworkers may have the ability to relate to similarly aged people in the cohorts or the clients that they're working with. in ways that you may not. There's just, I think, a certain kind of connection that's created when you're listening to the same music or when you're kind of living in the same areas or just having a similar experience in ways that are driven by commonalities across your age or across your generation. And those kinds of new connections that younger workers can build can result in new accounts. Now, as I was reading studies and talking to people, etc., I would run into this term really commonly, which was so-and-so, comma, expert on millennials. And I was thinking, I really want to be an expert on something, so I decided I would just say endorsement of expert on millennials everywhere. But not really. I think that I shouldn't actually really claim to be either, because the thing is, I'm a 17-year-old girl, which makes me the significantly younger end of the millennial generation, if you even include me in that at all. And I recommend you take everything I say with a grain of salt. Challenge your own assumptions, challenge my assumptions, and challenge anyone who makes blanket statements about millennials, because like any generation, you can't be reduced to broad generalizations with at least something getting lost. I can listen to Macklemore and The Who, like talking about my generation was my idea, take credit for that, but so there are many ways in which we defy the stereotypes that might be made about us. Now, forget that I just said all that about making blanket generalizations and big statements, and raise your hand if you're on Twitter. Okay, I'm seeing some raised hands. Okay, cool. If you can take out your smartphone and get on Twitter and do me a big favor, I want you to answer this one question, which is, what's one word that you think describes millennials? And tweet at me. I'm Adora SV, ADORASV. Can we have the Twitter and just the browser up here? Okay, cool. So once you start tweeting at me, I'll see it. Probably run back there. So Adora SV is one word that describes millennials. You can tweet multiple times if you want, if you just have this overflowing set of adjectives, or verbs, or nouns. Non-discriminatory.
Nick, you tweeted right.
So, I'll run back there. Don't be shy. And if you're not on Twitter, feel free to just raise your hand and throw it out. So, who here is not on Twitter? Okay, cool. Do you have this? Why don't you start throwing out some words about millennials?
Lazy.
Lazy! We are starting on an auspicious note. Thank you. Lazy, what else?
Entitled.
Entitled.
Irresponsible.
Irresponsible.
Destructive.
Destructive or constructive? Distracted. Okay, great. Keep it coming. I feel like this is a group therapy session. Privileged. Connected.
Creative. I'll give you a good one.
Creative, thank you.
Unproductive. Hungover.
Wait, what did I say? Also, Brian, I'm really sorry, but I just could not.
Workers.
Workers?
Work. Energy.
Energy?
I really
What else?
I know what you're doing now.
Poor? Broke college student, I feel ya. Alright. We should get some more coming in on Twitter. I know you can type faster. I'm sorry. Poor? Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't
Here,
know.
that's a common theme. Alright, here is titled lazy, poor, creative, distracted. Any more negative words?
Hipster.
Hipster. That can also be a positive depending on your opinion of Lana Del Rey or others. Lucky, smart. Okay, what are some more positive words?
Ooh.
Arrogant, okay. Oh dear, we're getting back into the... Actually, yeah, okay, just keep it coming, like regardless of what it is.
Energetic.
Comfortable with technology, connected, adaptive,
Always on their phone.
always on their phones. I mean, hey, I'm saving paper. Energetic, searching, optimistic. How about we get like 2 or 3 more? 2 or 3 more.
Confident.
Confident, okay.
Resilient.
Resilient. 1 more.
Resourceful.
Resourceful. All right, I like it. We have a really eclectic mix of words there. Y'all have echoed some of the same sentiments that I've heard from lots of folks. Oh, and looks like there's some more up there as well. So thanks so much for participating on Twitter. I really appreciate it for those of you that did. Now, as I'm hearing these words, I definitely sense there's a kind of, I want to say almost like skepticism about the amount that millennials are able to offer within the workforce. Because if you have a group of people that is lazy and entitled, like what are they really bringing? And I hope to answer that question somewhat. And thanks so much for being honest, for shouting exactly what you thought or what you thought of off the top of your head. Well, here's what I know about millennials, or at least what the internet told me. In 2015, millennials will become the largest generation in the US workforce. A full 2/3 say they expect to be in management by 2024. Nearly 7 out of 10, or 68%, of hiring managers say millennials have skills prior generations do not. And more than 8 out of 10, 82%, of hiring managers feel that millennials are technologically adept. 60% of hiring managers agree that millennials are quick learners, so anyone who said adaptive or intuitive might have keyed in on that. And the majority, slight majority, 53% of hiring managers report difficulty finding and retaining millennial talent, more than 3 times the number who say it is easy to do so. The study also found that 58% of millennials expect to stay in their jobs fewer than 3 years. So we have a group of people who are going out there getting probably pretty good jobs, but actually thinking, I'm going to leave this when something better comes along or when I get tired. This contrasts with previous generations, with Generation X born between 1965 to 1981, leaving a company in 5 years on average, and baby boomers, those born between 1945 to 1964, leaving on average in 7 years. So that came from AlandSodesk.com. And so I was reading through that, and that same research has been echoed in a lot of places. I think that what we're seeing is a group of young people who are tech savvy, ambitious, hard to hold on to, and very fast to leave. Those are some of the traits that I want us to dissect and discuss today, starting with technology, since I did hear a couple people say technologically intuitive or good with tech, that sort of thing. In Time magazine, there was an article by Joel Stein where it declared people my age to be the me generation, found buried in our own narcissistic worlds, consumed in taking selfies all the time, and just generally being the selfish, lazy, entitled folks that some of your adjectives might have implied. And the article actually ultimately was quite uplifting, and it went on to describe millennials as quite a decent hope for the future. But at the same time, as that article came out, I started thinking about the issue, and I realized my friends have powerfully used technology to do everything from start education reform nonprofits, organize conferences, lead protests, develop best-selling apps, and more. This is a world in which a 17-year-old like Nick DeLuazio, creator of the news summarizing app Summly, can be paid $30 million by Yahoo for 18 months of his time. And the truth is, Yahoo wasn't paying Nick $30 million for his time, they were paying for his ideas. I am coming of age in a world where my big ideas may be worth more than my billable hours. Young people have increasing space to have a voice and develop innovations without waiting for an authority figure, whether that's our parents, professors, corporations, government, that nebulous establishment, to give us the green light. That means an economy that's more powerfully driven by ideas, sharing, and alternatives to traditional hierarchy than ever before. What I love most about the idea economy is this. It doesn't discriminate based on age. Ideas don't come time-stamped with a 17-year-old came up with this, or a 70-year-old came up with this. When new friends of mine find out that I gave a TED Talk in 2010, one of the first questions is, how old were you? And when I tell them I was 12, the immediate response to that is, but how does a 12-year-old give a TED Talk? And I realized when I went to the conference that I was the only 12-year-old around. In retrospect, I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was, because the TED conference is all about ideas worth spreading, and last I checked, ideas don't have an age restriction. And that was the biggest motivation behind me organizing TEDx Redmond, as I mentioned in the introduction. When I started thinking about organizing TEDx, and that I really wanted it to be something that was authentically youth-run, youth-attended, that showed that young people too deserve a marketplace for ideas, a forum for our big plans and goals. Our entire planning committee was comprised of middle and high school students, and 100% of the people that we invited to speak were under the age of 20. They just thought of amazing ideas or done various projects that really compelled us. So my friend Ethan Perrin was a speaker at TEDx Redmond in 2011, and he is a perfect epitome of the whole idea-driven person that I think the classic millennial really is. I first met him when he was the height of a hobbit in summer 2011. And that was the year he wanted to capture pictures of the curvature of the Earth. He'd seen photos from space that had cost $160 billion to photograph from the International Space Station. He wanted to take the same kinds of pictures. Not ambitious at all, right? He wanted to take them for $300. He was all of 13 years old. So how does a 13-year-old take pictures in near space? Well, if you don't mind clicking on the Ethan Perrin lens tab, appreciate it, thanks. So lens had all these different components. If you just scroll through, that'd be awesome. There are some pictures there. What he did was he packaged together a box of electronics with insulation to defend against negative 70-degree conditions. He loaded his point-and-shoot camera with a hack development kit that allowed him to trick the camera software into taking a picture every 10 seconds. He designed his own data logger that recorded temperature, air pressure, and GPS locations so that he could plot the journey on Google Earth. And finally, he attached a parachute and a weather balloon. At noon on August 8, 2011, he filled the balloon with 170 cubic feet of helium and launched it from his grandma's backyard. That's an example of one of the pictures it took quite early on its flight upwards. It took 1,021 pictures and logged 30,000 data points as it rose to 27,027 meters, and Ethan knows all those points by heart. At the highest altitude, the curvature of Earth and the abyss of space are clearly visible. 4 hours later, his family drove down this dusty country road, middle of nowhere, Kansas, to recover lens, where it was still lying in a ditch, the camera still snapping pictures. This is the world of the millennial coming of age story, a world in which 13-year-olds with a point-and-shoot camera that they got from their parents on Christmas can attach those cameras to weather balloons that go to space. He delivered a talk at another local TEDx event about lens recently, and I couldn't have been prouder of him. Just the fact that he did that as a 13-year-old really inspired me because I was older than him at the time. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, I really have no excuses. When we examine human history, the engine that fuels progress has always been good ideas. Before the internet age, individuals or groups who came up with ideas often had to rely on traditional methods to get funding and support to experiment with and prototype their products. I've heard my political science professor go on and on about how annoying and bureaucratic the institutional review process is and how much he wants to do these various kinds of research and how long he has to wait. And that made me realize that I am so very lucky to live right now where I have so many democratized tools at my disposal. I don't have to go to a university or a company to find a laser cutter or a 3D printer or even something that a few decades ago was used behind closed doors, a computer. Because of that democratization of tools, sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter have become go-to places for many people who have ideas that they need support for. So raise your hand if you've heard of Indiegogo or Kickstarter. Seeing some raised hands? Okay, actually most people here. Raise your hand if you've ever contributed to a pitch on one of those websites. See, okay, so we're slightly less generous than we are aware. It's okay. But Kickstarter and Indiegogo, for those of you who don't know, are both crowdfunding sites where anyone can upload a pitch for an idea that they have. One guy actually uploaded an idea which was making a potato salad, and for some reason, did you contribute to potato salad? Did you make potato salad? Like, oh my god, okay, wow. Of all the projects, I'm sorry, I'm probably shaming you a little bit. But yeah, you can, if you so desire, you can go to Kickstarter and you can contribute to a potato salad, or you can contribute to something that might actually help people. But, you know, all choices are
Good hire,
valid.
Mike, good hire.
And the amazing thing about crowdfunding to me is that it really takes this power and control out of the hands of a very institutional kind of hierarchy where you have to go through many, many layers, and instead you can really go directly to the people who might end up buying your product with it. And some folks I know back home, they created this student-run nonprofit organization called Student R&D, or Student Research and Development. And they supported students in their tech innovation endeavors by giving grants. So back in 2011, one project being developed was a plasma speaker. And if we could get Student R&D documentary, yeah, that'd be great. Or you played off there, we're off the right on YouTube. Thanks.
This is a pulse width driver. I guess we'll use it for the plasma speaker, but you can also use it for neon signs. And then if we go through a fluorescent tube, it excites the air inside, kicks off ultraviolet, and then the fluorescent powder turns it into visible light. So we've made the carrier circuit for the plasma speaker. Same one as before, but we're going to modulate it soon. But now we're just making sure our spark gap is accurate. And let's see how hot it is. It's a few million degrees.
They included the correction.
There's varying frequency through the arc itself using a tone generator.
You can hear the noises of the plasma speaker right here.
This is a tone generator. I've never seen a kit available for this, and I spent the last like 5 hours looking. There's instructables on it, but nobody offers a kit.
We actually have an amplifier downstairs that we use to drive speakers.
Yes.
I think if we turn those down enough, we can drive this.
Completely fine, yeah.
Do you want to go test that?
This can handle up to 15 volts, so we'll just measure it.
Let's go test it.
Yeah.
Well, alright, so I brought in my mixer over here, and we're actually going to be hooking up, we just hooked up this mixer to the plasma speaker. So, you can kind of hear it, amazing.
Get a little more plays at a time is ideal.
Oh,
yeah. Like that's why the Mario song, like the Halo theme. Any video game song is perfect because it's mono, you know. Today we made just tremendous progress. We took a theory of circuit function and turned it into a working model. And there was no instructables, no guidelines. We just used basic knowledge and had it work out. It was fantastic.
Empowering students.
And that's the best way to empower somebody.
Inspire, create, learn.
That's the best way to empower somebody. I love how he said that at the end, how it was just giving the power to make that. They didn't have instructables, they didn't have a kit. What they were trying to do is actually make a kit so that other people around the world could make their own plasma speakers. They needed $2,000, they got $18,574 and 240 backers. And that was more than 8 times what they'd asked for originally. I actually got to be there in the room when they were filming parts of that, and I remember there was just this, like, the space they were using was this really nondescript office space, kind of like above a dry cleaner, so it was all wood. So as they had this thing, which was like 1,000 degrees, I kept on thinking, oh my god, if someone knocks us over, we are all burning. Which was kind of a grim thought to have while a fundraising video was being made, but obviously we survived, and it was really inspired me to see personally as somebody who had never really been into engineering or computer science or any of these other things that I guess my friends and I would usually see as really geeky or kind of out of reach. That seemed very accessible and really cool to me. Beyond being super cool, this kind of funding structure provides alternatives, as I mentioned earlier, to traditional hierarchies. And student R&D wasn't this giant organization housed on the penthouse floor of a gleaming office tower. It was a scrappy nonprofit consisting of a bunch of computer geeks getting together to work on what they really loved. And no one was established, no one was rich, nobody was all that powerful until their fingers hit the keyboards and their minds hit the grindstone. Because over the course of my high school career, the founder of student R&D was one of my best friend's older brothers. So I got to see it really firsthand transform from this really tiny organization that did like free laser cutting workshops on the weekends to an organization that now hosts Code Day 24-hour hackathon events at cities around the United States. And I think this season is happening in 31 different cities around the nation. So that happened just over the course of a couple of years. I don't think that would have been possible in an age before Kickstarter, before Hackathon was part of our vernacular, or before social media made it possible to advertise Code Day and make it possible for hundreds of these local organizers to start in their own cities. The millennial-fueled economy is an idea economy. The technological innovations that young people are surrounded by every day motivate us to go out into the world and think about what we can do. Another Cal alum, Andrea Lowe, actually started this really cool fundraising organization called Piggybacker, which was designed to bring the same ideas behind Kickstarter and Indiegogo to the elementary school, middle school crowd, because teachers, superintendents, and parents often don't want their kids on regular crowdfunding sites, and in fact Kickstarter, I'm pretty sure, has an age restriction of over 18, which means, yeah, no Kickstarter for me, at least if I want to get money, which is kind of sad. So Piggybacker ended up creating a solution to this problem that a lot of people didn't know existed, and it gave young people the opportunity to raise money, whether it was for clubs, projects, ideas, whatever else, and it actually gamified the whole process to teach the students involved about good fundraising tactics. So that was somebody who straight out of Berkeley just saw a problem where no one else had really seen a problem and created a solution that now schools and students across the country are using. Another one of my friends, Ryan Orbuck, created an app called Finish, which was an anti-procrastination app, really useful for people like me who are prone to writing 5-page papers the morning they are due. And it was an app that just allowed you to do something very simple, which was rank your tasks by how soon they were coming up, but also by the urgency and importance needed for each. 17 magazine said it was an app that all girls needed, so clearly that is a resounding endorsement. But beyond 17 magazine's wonderful combination, it also won Apple's Design Award in 2013. And Ryan is just a year older than I am. So before you say that all millennials are necessarily privileged, entitled, and lazy, well, maybe we are privileged, entitled, and lazy, but if we can make apps that win Apple's Design Award and keep us from procrastinating too much, if we can raise $18,574 when we meant to raise $2,000, that's pretty good payoff for being entitled and lazy and privileged. Changing company culture to more effectively retain millennials is absolutely crucial to being able to harness this technological intuitiveness, this innovation, this willingness to defy traditional structures and look for funding wherever it exists, to look for ways to make our ideas come to fruition wherever they exist. And I think that those are things that are incredibly valuable. Some changes to culture, like relaxing the workplace dress code, may seem relatively shallow, but all the changes I'm going to propose have origins that are deeply rooted in our childhoods or our lived experiences. For instance, some of the parents in the audience, who here is a parent, can raise your hand. All right, seeing a lot of raised hands. You might have some familiarity with trophies, as you've probably handled many trophies. When my parents moved from my childhood home near Seattle to Marin County last year, one of the biggest challenges was not moving furniture or packing books, but managing to figure out what to do with all the trophies. Most of them were my sister's, because she's much cooler and smarter than I am, but mostly because she plays piano and violin. And there were violin trophies, and piano trophies, and track and cross-country trophies, and there was my single speech and debate trophy, and there was an education award trophy. Many of us grew up receiving awards and commendations and certificates, those stereotypical A's for efforts or medals for participation, and as much as you might hate them, take a moment to imagine going through an entire life of receiving them. And sure, maybe you can argue that it would make someone spoiled or dissatisfied, but I'm not quite that pessimistic. I think that it simply makes us expect to hear something. It makes us expect instant feedback, maybe more than our parents would. That doesn't mean that we want to hear, good job, you go, you're the best, all the time. It just means that we want someone to pay attention to what we do. And when we make significant improvements, I think that it's important to have somebody identify that. Passing off an improvement or somebody being very self-motivated or doing something awesome as just another part of the job, as something that they should do anyway without a murmur, does a disservice, I think, to people who are expecting some kind of feedback. We grew up texting and using Facebook and Twitter, so we're accustomed to very quick connection and responses. In the workplace, we run a similar structure. MTV did this study that they called No Callers, which is kind of interesting, and it was just looking at millennial attitudes in the workplace. And they said 80% of millennials said they want regular feedback from their managers, and 75% yearn for mentors. For the most part, millennials aren't fans of having to wait 6 months or a year to get a formal review of their work, end quote. And that's so true, because in high school, we turned in a paper, and I've heard friends complain if we don't get feedback on that paper or feedback on a test within a week or two. Obviously, we understand that some time has to pass, but I think that we also know, we've grown up playing games, we did all those Khan Academy quizzes where it would tell us immediately, you got the right answer, you got the wrong answer, and we would learn instantly from that kind of feedback. We want to be quick learners, and in order to be quick learners, we need quick feedback. Another area that experts have identified as a classic trait of millennials is the valuation of meaning and impact in our work as much more important than just pay and cushy benefits. Everything I've read emphasizes the same central point, which is this. Young people want to be involved in strategy and not just told what to do. We are a dissatisfied, sometimes restless group, at least at this stage in our lives. My cousin, that same 20-something in San Francisco who I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, who I had a conversation with about figuring stuff out in life, she worked a risk analysis job with the kind of pay that enabled her to live in a gorgeous apartment atop a hill with views of the whole city. And when I stayed with her over New Year's, I went out onto her balcony and I looked around, and it felt like the opening scene of The American Dream. And yet, a couple weeks ago, she threw that away. Or maybe I should say throw that away, like that has negative connotations, but she quit her job because she wanted to travel Asia and Europe instead. And today she posted on Facebook that she got her luggage and about a couple of grand stolen in Venice. So beware of pickpocketers. But the more important part of her story that I picked up from what she told me was that she was looking for more. Her work was uninspiring. As Time magazine succinctly put it, millennials aren't all about the money. And that's why she can be much happier in Venice getting money stolen than at home in San Francisco working a job that she doesn't feel enables her to contribute enough. Half the members of Generation Y surveyed said they would, quote, rather have no job than a job they hate. Among the top options for job desirability, loving what I do outranked salaries and big bonuses. The vast majority, 83%, are looking for a job where creativity is valued, while more than 9 in 10 millennials are motivated to work harder when they know where their work is going. And they want supervisors, managers, and executives to listen to their ideas. That's why a huge part of changing up company culture has to start at a more meaningful level than relaxing what people can wear at work. But it has to start with mentorship. When I say the word mentorship, what's the first image that comes to your mind? Is someone who's worked in the field for decades showing a new kid the ropes? Challenge that image for a moment. I want you to think about reverse mentoring, where a young person considers what they can teach a more senior colleague. And I first encountered reverse mentoring a couple of years ago. I was at this advertising conference in Cannes, and a senior executive at MTV said, yeah, of course we think about what we can learn from those who are younger than us. We have a system in place that forces us to do that because what we do is our interns actually have to mentor us. And I was like, wait, what, your interns? And this executive said, yeah, we have this program where this intern actually tries to teach us about the kind of music they're listening to. We ask them about their lives. We try to have this lens into the world that they are living in. Forbes did a similar thing. They launched a reverse mentoring initiative called Mentor the Moguls to bring together middle and high school students with Forbes Global 2000 executives. Andrew Satter, a founder and CEO of a New York-based executive coaching company, said that having young people in this mentorship role not only gave their older mentees training on the latest social media platforms, but also more candid feedback than the highly filtered intel they normally get. Sometimes a younger and more junior person hasn't yet learned what they can't say. They have fresh eyes and fresh ears and a fresh tongue. End quote. I heard that with kind of a smile on my face because that's one of the traits of young people that I've spoken about, particularly after TED, when people really like Adore give us a talk on what adults can learn from kids. I would say, well, honesty is this thing that we have in abundance. At 3 years old, I will look at somebody and say, you have a big nose, and it's like, what did she just say? But at the same time, it's okay because you're a little kid, and then we learn what not to say and how to say things. And it's so crucial that honesty is treated as a plus within one's company. We need honesty to build humility, that central theme that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Learning is truly a two-way street. In the traditional student-teacher or mentor-mentee model, where we think that the only person who has someone to teach is the older grown-up in the room, that is a one-way road to nowhere. In my talks for teachers and principals, I advocate greater reciprocity within the classroom. And I truly admire the teachers who have the humility and the courage to stand up and say, I learn more from the young people in my classroom when I teach. I advocate the same kind of reciprocity within businesses. I would also ask, what kind of environment would you want your children to enter in a decade or two whenever they enter the workforce? Would you want it to be one where they meet cold shoulders and closed doors, or one where they encounter people who are willing to learn as much as they teach? Another area where millennials see things differently is the hierarchy within the systems that we join. I am co-president of my Residence Hall Association. I was talking with the resident director, who's a paid professional staff member, and he was explaining to me that he manages all the RAs, and that there's an assistant director above him, and the assistant director has another higher up, and there are basically all these higher ups until you get to the chancellor himself. And so I was listening to this, and one of my friends comes in and asks another person there, what are they talking about? And that other person said, bureaucracy upon bureaucracy upon bureaucracy. Oh, and pseudo-employment. And I looked at him and I was like, you know, that's not the most tactful thing to say in front of our resident director. But I realized that it indicates many young people hold those bureaucracies upon bureaucracies in pretty low regard. We're not impressed by the really long, unparsable job titles on business cards that our family and friends can't understand. According to the Time magazine article about working millennials, many of us have little interest in hierarchy and are not particularly impressed with titles and positions within the traditional pyramid structure. And many millennials believe that everyone should be heard from and the best ideas should reign, not the ideas from whoever's most senior or who has a corner office. Attracting and recruiting the most innovative young people. In a world where we can get tens of thousands of dollars for a good idea on Kickstarter means not relying on the same old promises that if you work here for enough years, you will get this kind of pay or the corner office. Older established companies like Microsoft or GE have HR pages that read the same way, they promise the same things, they use the same fonts. Contrastingly, the startup Mind Valley, which won the Most Democratic Workplace Award, described themselves on their recruiting page this way. Whip out a blender, throw in epic dreams, bleeding-edge technology, and quirky work culture, and grind them into a gooey, delicious pulp. What you'll get is Mind Valley, one of the world's biggest and weirdest online publishing companies in the personal growth industry. So I would challenge you to think about how you can make your culture quirky, epic, gooey, even though those words might not be things that appeal to you instantly. And more importantly, how are you creating, or how can you create this idea economy and an environment of sharing within your workplace, one that is inviting for millennials? Maybe throw out an idea or two. What do you think is a way you could make your company more inviting to the young people who are joining? Anyone? Brave enough? I'm sorry?
Ping pong.
Ping pong? Okay. What else? How do we make a place quirky, epic, gooey, weird?
Collaborative environments.
Collaborative environments. I love it. So collaborative environments, ping pong. Third idea?
Naked Fridays.
Naked Fridays.
He doesn't work here.
That was a very Mean Girls-esque moment. It doesn't even go here. I hope. Well, two ideas that are fairly simple to implement. I think ping pong is very reasonable. Naked Fridays maybe a little bit more difficult legally, but this is San Francisco. Two ideas that are a little easier to implement are encouraging more casual attire and changing time structures to make sure that people are able to work flexible hours. 79% of millennials think they should be allowed to wear jeans to work. I found it really, I think only in an MTV study would you ask a question like, should you be allowed to wear jeans to work? And 93% of millennials say they want a job where they can be themselves, which was expanded to include dressing the way that they want. And 81% of millennials think they should be allowed to make their own hours at work. So I would say that as a generation, there are so many places for us to share the ideas that we're passionate about. There are many alternatives to traditional hierarchies available to us today that we are ready to seize. That's why it's up to you to work more like an organism and less like an organization. Be a living, breathing, changing, responsive place so that those that join you are not there to work up through a structure, but rather immediately be part of a living system. Ultimately, maybe I'm so optimistic about the future of millennials in the workplace working with more senior employees because one of the biggest success stories when it comes to millennials working with older folks comes from my own life. I want to throw a huge shout out to my mom, who's sitting right there, who's been absolutely instrumental in my work in life ever since I started writing when I was 4 years old. She motivated me to pick up poetry by bribing me with Shel Silverstein books. And while I was in Berkeley trying out for improv comedy teams and watching movies with friends and making Valentine's Day plans, my mom was tirelessly collecting links and sending me emails with all this information and occasionally being a sounding board for my ideas on the subject. We had this late night phone call where I was sitting in the stairwell and I was like, okay, here are all the ideas that are running through my head. And my mom and I have been able to talk a a lot about all kinds of issues pertinent to work, pertinent to my talks, pertinent to just issues in the world that I've been thinking about. And like any mom and daughter, we have arguments, and there are times when she has to send me a text to say, I hope you're cleaning your dorm, or don't worry, this is on a monthly basis, not a weekly one, or something like that. But when we do work together, when we collaborate, when we make that time, when I learn from her and when she learns from me, magic truly happens. I know that you and people you work with from different generations can do the exact same thing within the workplace. And just as surely as this speech came together in the 11th hour, because I really need to not procrastinate, but a 50-year-old woman and a 17-year-old girl messaged each other on Facebook in all caps about 1,000 different ideas. I believe that you can build bridges between colleagues' youth and experience that allow you to better serve clients and each other. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to each other, to never forget that we still have a lot of growing up to do. Thank you so much.